Helen was in a hurry to get to work, where she had been a chemistry teacher for many years. She had already turned 55, and in the near future, Helen was going to take a well-deserved retirement. But today was a special and very important day, because today was exam day. Entering the classroom, Helen saw her student Jenny, who also came for the exam today. This girl had always been so calm and studied well. But for some reason lately the girl had become thoughtful and absent-minded. She was less able to learn new subjects, and it frustrated Helen. She really wanted her favorite pupil to get the highest score on the exam, because she was going to enter medical school and become a doctor. And so Jenny took her exercises and questions and turned very pale when she looked at her questions. Time went by, almost all the children answered the tests and began to hand in the worksheets. Only a few people were left. Helen watched Jenny anxiously. Something strange was going on with the girl. It was obvious that she was confused and her test sheet was not filled halfway. The teacher was staring at the pupil, but she was sitting still. All the children turned in their tests and left. Helen and Jenny remained in the classroom. Then Helen approached the girl and asked what happened and what the problem was. Jenny didn't look up and didn't answer anything. Helen persisted and asked her to explain what Jenny's issue was. And the girl began to tell her that she couldn't answer all the questions because she hadn't studied. Helen asked how it happened, because Jenny had always wanted to go to medical school, and there was nothing to do there without chemistry. The girl suddenly cried and through her tears said that her mother was very sick. 6 months ago they had found out about the disease. It was impossible to help her and her mother was dying before her eyes at home in terrible agony. Her grandmother lived with them and helped take care of her mother, but the girl tried to do most of the housework and care for her mother on her own. Jenny slept very little and took all her strength. Her mother screamed in pain, and Jenny spent every night at her mother's bedside comforting and caring for her. Jenny was unable to concentrate on her studies until the end. It was chemistry that she lacked strength and time. Other examinations Jenny passed with high marks, but in chemistry she had no luck. She had questions that she almost could not answer. Telling it all, the girl burst into tears, as if getting rid of her resentment at the monstrous injustice. She knew perfectly well that not passing the test meant goodbye to her cherished dream of becoming a doctor. Helen looked at the girl and felt sorry for her. Life is so unfair. This child, more than anyone else all these years, has studied to get into medical school, and somehow she was faced with such a difficult test that the child was ready to break under the weight of it. And Helen decided to be the one to support this girl in her difficult situation. Despite her position and her responsibility to assess knowledge in an unbiased way, the woman chose to help the girl answer the rest of the questions in the test. The teacher asked leading questions about the subject, and Jenny was able to cope and eventually got the highest score in chemistry. Helen was pleased with the result of the work done, because she was sure that the girl would become an outstanding doctor, because she was so smart and capable. To farewell, Helen told her that she should always be sure that she can do more than she thinks, and then she will succeed. Jenny remembered those words for the rest of her life. Time passed. Helen left school for a well-deserved retirement. Her health was failing her and she was often sick. One day, she was hospitalized. She was treated in the hospital, but there were no relatives to visit and support her, because during her long life Helen had never been married and had no children. The woman did not feel well, refused to eat or drink. For several years she had spent most of her money on pills and doctors, but all this only brought relief for a short time. Helen was so tired of all this, that she even dreamed of soon going to the beyond. Just in the hospital, where Helen was, a famous doctor from the university hospital came to consult the doctors of the hospital. One day, some noise was heard in the corridor and a delegation of doctors entered the Helen's ward. The head doctor began to tell the diagnosis of Helen, and stressed that medicine can only offer symptomatic therapy. Curing the disease was impossible. The doctor who came for a consultation began to say that this woman may not be hopeless. Just at their clinic they had several cases of such patients cured by the new protocol, and she did not rule out the possibility of recovery. Helen shuddered when she heard the woman's voice, something familiar about it. She looked at the doctor, and suddenly recognized her as Jenny, her former student. The girl, who Helen had helped pass the chemistry test, was now standing in front of her as a doctor and a highly respected professional. The woman had tears in her eyes. She opened her mouth to say a word, but could not. And then Jenny came up herself, stroked her hand and said that she would come later, and they would talk about everything. All the doctors around her looked at each other in bewilderment. Helen just nodded in response and smiled. The elderly woman could not find herself all day. She even got out of bed and walked around the room for a while in spite of the pain. Jenny came late in the evening, when all the consultations were over. Helen was happy that her student had become a doctor. Jenny told her teacher that her mother died right after she entered medical school. And her grandmother passed away 2 years after her mother. All these years, Jenny often remembered Helen, because thanks to her she was who she had become. And now she would try her best to thank and help her teacher. Helen sighed happily because it was the best gift for her. Jenny's success and this meeting warmed her soul. For several weeks, Jenny visited her former teacher every day. The elderly woman felt better every day. The treatment was paying off, and communicating with Jenny gave her strength. One day Jenny came in and began a serious conversation with Helen. She had no parents and wanted Helen to become her family. So Jenny offered Helen to move in with her and her husband. He didn't mind either, everything had already been arranged. Helen cried, not believing her happiness. Fate brought her and Jenny together again. Or maybe it wasn't fate at all, and Helen got what she deserved. Jenny really took the elderly woman with her, and now Helen had a wonderful family. She was surrounded by care, happy in her old age, and feeling much better.